I was a mechanic for a while, and then I became a service advisor. One day I'm telling my dad, our service advisor sucks, can't sell anything. And my dad says, well, if you think you can do it better, you got the job.
Yeah.
Well, he was the one writing service. How do I make this shop profitable? It's funny because my dad could drive a car around the block and tell you what's wrong with it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how well he knew engines and cars and all that. But he had a business that he didn't understand, and that was the thing that would have allowed him to have a better life outside of all of that.
You're listening to the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, featuring real business owners telling real stories about their real business experiences. Here are your hosts, John Chiappetta and Eric Jorn.
Welcome to another episode of Blood, Sweat, and Business. Today we have Cecil Bullard from the Institute of Automotive Business Excellence.
Thank you. Do I have to bleed and sweat too? I don't know.
That is the goal. We're really going to lay the heat and turn up the pressure. So this is our first Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast live at the Vision Conference out in Kansas City. We're super excited to have you and super excited to be here.
I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. So tell me about how did you get the Institute started? What's the idea, concept, and
it goes way back. When I was a kid, my dad had a shop, and we didn't starve to death or anything, but we just didn't really make any money. So when there was a need for, like, I wanted to play basketball, we couldn't buy Converse. We had to buy the X brand shoes. There just wasn't that kind of money.
Yeah.
When it was time for scout camp, there was no money for scout camp. And my dad worked he would get up before I ever got up. And now that I'm getting old, I understand why, because his body hurt, right? And he would wake up. But then he'd come home at 7, 8, 9 at night, 10, and fall asleep in his chair. And then the next morning he'd be gone. So I didn't even know my father very well, which when you're a kid, you're like, you don't understand it all, right? And then I went to college to play basketball. And, I have this thing about, here's my dad, and, I don't really know who he is. And, he just worked so hard his entire life. He's still working hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I got injured. I thought I was going to play pro sports. I wanted to play basketball. And some of the guys I played with at the college I was at, they went on to the pros, and I got injured. And that was it. I didn't know what to do. I'm 19, and I kind of went to college not for the education. I went for the basketball and the girls. And I called my dad, and I also lazy. I'm lazy at heart, right?
Yep.
So I didn't want to go interview for a job. I didn't want to go in the military because I don't want anybody telling me what to do. And I told him I want to come and you can teach me how to be a mechanic. So I was a mechanic for a while, and then I became a service advisor. One day I'm telling my dad, our service advisor sucks, can't sell anything. And my dad says, well, if you think you can do it better, you got the job.
Yeah.
Well, he was the one writing service. So, I became a service advisor. Now we get to the kind of the meat.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a young person. I don't necessarily have real direction at this point. But I'm writing service in a shop, and I don't really know how to do it. I'm good because I'm outgoing and I'm direct and all of that. But and I went to an ASCCA event. They used to do conventions like this.
Yep.
And so I went to this convention with my dad, and we sat down in a class. And there was a guy named Jim Hunt who was teaching the class, and I'm 23, 24 years old. And I thought to myself, I want to be that guy. That's what I want to do when I grow up. And really, it kind of compounded because when we went home, we're driving home about an hour and a half drive to where we live in Palm Springs. And my dad and I are talking, and I'm like, that guy was an ass. But he said we could do this. He was the first guy to say you could raise your labor rate. And, we could raise our labor rate. Holy smokes. And then he said, well, you can charge shop supplies. And, he said you could do this. So we went home, and we made, 3 or 4 changes. And all of a sudden there's another $3-4 grand a month in our business.
Wow.
I'm like, holy smokes, I'm truly at this point believing that you can make money in this business and have a life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I didn't believe it, right? And I made a decision at some point in that young part of my life that if I was going to write service, if I was going to be in the automotive business, not only did I want to be a coach, right, and help other people, because I really wanted to help my dad have a life outside of the business. He didn't know how to do that, right?
Yeah.
And at that time, I also made a decision kind of like, if I'm going to do this, I want to be the best. So I want to get everything I can. So I went to a guy named Bob O'Connor. I went to his stuff. There was a Management Success, which was Mike Lee. I went to his stuff. And I just started getting all this education. And I'm also like a voracious reader. So I'm just reading all these business books and trying to get it all figured out. And I became a manager of the store. We ended up having 3 stores at one point.
Oh, wow.
And I sold and moved to Utah 26 years ago. But I left the business because my father, I got to know him really well for over 17 years of working with him. And I love him to this day. I wish he was still around. He passed away, 10, 12 years ago. And I couldn't help him have a life outside of his business because by the time I was able to do that, he wasn't. He had worked so hard, so long, he didn't know how to not do that, right?
Wow.
Nothing outside of his life. I bought him golf clubs, took him out to play golf, and he hated it. He'd rather be working, you know? And so I decided at that point I'm going to, have a coaching and consulting company. But I also was kind of sour on the industry, so I did some other things. Moved up to Utah. I got injured, and I shattered my right ankle.
Oh, wow.
And I spent 2 years having 7 surgeries so I could walk again. And at that point in time, I went back to college. I've got a couple of degrees. And just because I was like, I couldn't work. And I was bored to death. I'm also somebody who likes to work, right, to have something to do.
Yep.
And a friend of mine calls me who I had been on the board of the ASCCA when I was like 24 for a couple of years.
Wow.
And a friend of mine who had been the president at the time calls me up and he says, I've got this shop. Now, I'm living in Ogden, Utah, just north of Salt Lake at this point in time. His shop is in Mountain View, California. And he says, Cecil, you need to come run my shop for me. I need help. And I'm like, dude, I live here. I've got 4 kids, a family.
Yep.
Do you know what it costs to live in, Northern California as opposed to Ogden, Utah, et cetera?
It's a little different.
And he said, well, right now you're not doing anything. And I wasn't. And he said, so let me fly you out, spend 3-4 days here. I'll take you some good meals. You and I can get, buddy, blah, blah, blah. And I come into this shop, and it's gorgeous. It's 15 bays, drive-through shop. It's one of the nicest shops I've seen in my entire life.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, my God, this would be so fun to work here and make this thing really take off. And then we spent a couple of days together, and he's trying to convince me to come out. And I'm like, I'd have to have a place to live. I'm not moving the family out. He said, okay, well, we got a place for you, right? He had a secondary part of his house that was a bedroom and a bath, all kind of off to itself.
Okay.
Own entrance, et cetera. Yep. He's like, okay, so we got that handled. And I said, I'm not bringing my car here. We got a car for you. Ended up with a 94 Cadillac Eldorado. Really
oh, nice.
At the time. And we're talking 2003-ish.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I was like, well, I got to go home and see my family, and I'm not paying for flights back and forth. He said, we'll take care of that. So I made a deal to work for him for a year and turn the shop around. They were doing just a little under 1.1 million, 14 employees, 5 techs.
And a lot of bays.
Losing a lot of money, right?
Wow.
And with, $23,000 a month was the payment on the property, et cetera.
Yep.
And so I came in and I told him, I said, if I'm going to work for you, you got to understand something. Number one, you're not buying my time. You're buying a result. So I'm going to come in and manage and get the result we need. And that's got to be okay, right? He said, okay. And then the second thing was, these people that you have don't work for you anymore. They work for me. when you're managing, you have to
Mm-hmm.
have the authority and you have to have the chain of command and all of that. So anyway, I took over running the shop. The first year we did 1.8 million from doing just under 1.1, and we did it with 4 techs.
Wow.
And then by the third year, we were doing 2.6 million with 4 techs. And it was so, we were so successful. It really worked well, right?
Yeah.
And I think, all the experience I'd had over the years, all the classes I'd taken, just kind of really culminated in, okay, I can do this. And so one of the training companies that was around at the time was doing some training there, and the owner went there, and he came back and he said, Cecil, you need to work for those guys. You can still run the shop, but I know you want to do coaching and consulting. He and I had talked about it.
Yep.
And he was like, so you need to go to work for those guys. So I went to one of their trainings, and I pulled aside their top guy, and I said, you need me to work for you. And he was like, well, who the heck are you? And I said, I'm the guy that took this shop from here to here. And it got me my in the industry.
Nice.
So, this is 2005-ish.
Okay.
And so I worked for them for about a year and a half. And then I felt like I could do better, like typical tech.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take over. I could make more money. I could do this better. I really felt like we weren't serving our customers well enough.
Yep.
Because we were doing kind of, there's 4 or 5 basic things a coach can come in and help you with, and you're going to make money, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's like 50 other things that are going to get you the rest and the life you want and all of that. And I didn't feel like we were doing the other 50.
Okay.
So I met with the owner, and I said, hey, I've got all these processes, systems, all this stuff from this business I'm running,
mm-hmm.
and I'm happy to come in and train all your coaches and, really make the impact that I want to make.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, no, we're making plenty of money. We don't need that. And so I quit like right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I started my own coaching company, which wasn't this company, but a couple years later I founded this company. And so the Institute's been around since 2011, I want to say.
Okay.
Somewhere right in there. And I've been coaching since about 2005 in the industry. But the thing is, so my dad was still running the shop. We didn't talk for a while after I left, but then we got to be friends again. And one day he called me up. He said, I really want you to come run my shop. But by then I had a coaching company. I had other responsibilities to other people. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to have like serious impact in the industry. When I die, I would really like somebody to go, Cecil he really helped our company. He really made a difference for us. And it's not just about your company because, the Institute's mission statement is better business, better life, better industry.
Yeah.
I think if my father's shop had been better run, more financially prosperous, my dad wouldn't have worked as much. There would have been money for other things, and maybe he would have lived longer. And he would have had a relationship with his kids and his grandkids. My father, I have a son named after me, who's really named after my dad. I have my dad's name, Cecil.
Okay.
And so I have a son, Cecil. And my parents, we lived on the same street down like a block, and my parents did not get to know my children.
Wow. When
we were there because my dad was always working. They didn't have time for it. And you think about, what life's all about. It's not your work is supposed to support your family and your life outside of work, right? Work is not supposed to be everything.
Exactly.
But it was for my father, and I think there's too many guys in this industry that have kind of lost hope in I have this shop. I'm not making the kind of money I need, but I don't think I can make money here. So I'm just going to work I have a bad job that I'm going to live with until I die.
Yeah.
And it affects the family and the families of the people that work for you. So when we come into a shop and we're able to kind of help them overcome some of that and really start to make a decent living in their business, it's amazing to see how that affects their time. Now all of a sudden they're like, hey, I'm going home at 5. I'm going to go to my kid's concert. I'm going to go to my kid's a basketball game, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, if we're able to, right now in our industry, we have this terrible technician shortage,
mm-hmm.
right? And it's epidemic currently.
Yep.
And what are we going to, why? Why do we have a shortage of techs? Because the shops that are running well, they can pay techs, and they pay techs well.
Yep.
But the real complaint, if you listen to it online, is they're not treating me right. They don't care about me. They don't pay me well. And it's all because the shop owner doesn't really understand their business financially and know how to make money. You guys have seen it where you get a shop in, they started with coaching, they're at this point, and then, you look over 6 months, 8 months, all of a sudden they're making 15% net where they were making 2 or 3.
Yep.
And now there's more ability to have a life outside, and also it reduces the stress and the worry, so maybe you live longer. So
totally.
Again, long story, but my father had a stroke working.
Oh.
And it didn't affect him like some people lose the use of an arm or, one side of their body or anything like that, or they can't talk. Didn't affect him that way. But he was a man who was extremely sure of himself, and after the stroke, he wasn't.
Lost his confidence.
Okay? Yeah, and the doctors told him, you can't work anymore, or you're going to die. So he closes the shop up, and when he called me, I was in Utah, he's in Southern California. I drive down there, he calls me, he says, I need you to help me, wrap things up. And I go to the shop, and it's really sad because it was, this is in the 15 years ago, 12 years ago. The shop is like a 1970s shop.
Okay.
There's all the junk and the old parts and all of that. And, we're cleaning that up. And I had worked there for 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really sad. And then my dad moved up to Utah with my mother. A year and a half later, he got pneumonia.
Oh.
And he was in the hospital for about a month and a half. He had smoked for years and years, so his lungs weren't great.
Yeah.
And he got out on Christmas Day of the hospital. And he was out for about 5 days, and then he passed out at some store him and Mom were at.
Oh.
And he went back in the hospital, and he was in there for about a month and a half, and then he died.
It's tough.
And I'm traveling a lot at the time because I'm coaching.
Yep.
And I'm going back and forth, to things like this and everything. So I wasn't able to be there the whole time, but I come home and I see my dad. So about a week before he died, we're talking to the doctors, and we know the doctors are telling us he's not going to make it.
Yeah.
And he's laying in the bed, and he's conscious, but he's got a tube down his, throat and et cetera. So I walked in and I said, hey, Dad, are we okay? Fathers and sons,
it's different.
I've got 2 sons. It's hard, right? Especially if you work with them. And he looked at me and he wrote down yes on his little pad he had.
Wow.
And then he wrote down, I'm sorry.
Ugh.
That and I knew exactly what that was because I played basketball in high school. I lettered in basketball and football, ran track. I was in the musicals, and he never came to any of that stuff. And so here's this person at the end of their life, and they know it's the end of their life. And what are they thinking about?
Yeah.
Are they thinking about all the customers they helped, and, all the cars they fixed for free and all of that? Or is he thinking about, I never went to my son's games. I didn't get to know my grandchildren. I'm not going to have the opportunity to do those things at this point.
Yeah.
And, it's like, it's a heartbreaking point in time. And then I had to go out of town, and he passed away, and he's gone. And I thought to myself, first of all, I knew I wanted to be a coach and a consultant when I was 23 or 24.
Yep.
Didn't happen until I was, in my mid 40s.
Mm-hmm.
But because there were things I needed to learn. There was a lot of experience I needed to gain, et cetera. And the heartbreaking point is how many guys are out there in my father's situation that are they just feel like I got nowhere to go.
They're stuck.
Right? I'm just going to be stuck here. I'm going to have a miserable life. I'm going to work myself to death. The wife is, my mom would yell at my dad all the time about not being home.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, I got to pay the bills, so I got to work. And so now it's, again, better business, better life, better industry. And I think as an industry, we need to become more and more professional if we're going to exist in a 2030 world.
Totally.
Because there's too many shops that are just struggling and barely making it. They're just surviving instead of thriving. And thriving, you can thrive in this business. We've proven it over and over and over again with the clients that we work with.
It's fascinating. When I said I wanted to go work with automotive shops, everybody kind of looked at me and they said,
like, what?
They don't make any money.
Yeah.
What can we do for them? And I said, I think there's a lot more here. And then I started digging into the industry, and I find successful shops in these coaching companies, and I see there's unlimited potential.
Yeah, and there's so many shops that where the wife or the daughter or the mother, they're doing the bookkeeping, but it's just basic bookkeeping, right? It's not really accounting. It's not really, how do I make this shop profitable? They don't. It's funny because my dad could drive a car around the block and tell you what's wrong with it.
Yeah,
that's how well he knew engines and cars and all that. But he had a business that he didn't understand, and that was the thing that would have allowed him to have a better life outside of all of that.
Yeah,
and so we have a lot of shops. There's so much potential here, and for you guys that are a really good accounting company, you do a great job. Having you help them. There's so much room for that.
Yeah.
In this industry, even today, we get clients that they don't even have a point of sale. They're still handwriting work orders.
We still see that too.
And how do you run a business like that today? I mean,
it is. You're downgrading your customer experience.
Well, I don't think it's just that. I think you're also putting yourself. Why does the IRS audit people? What are the top reasons the IRS audit people? They have the statistical data. They understand what the shop should be doing, how the shop should be doing. I know of some states that have come in and done sales tax audits.
And
they've realized, they've said, you didn't charge enough for your parts, so you owe us this sales tax, but you never even charged for it.
Yep.
Because you didn't mark your parts up correctly, but the state knows that you should have marked them up here and you should have had this profit. Yep. And the state is saying you cheated us when you really didn't. You really cheated yourself. But I've seen that happen. I've seen the IRS come in because the lifestyle, the fact that you're actually alive and you're not dying with the kind of money you're making.
Yeah.
The IRS is like, wait a minute, you can't make $30,000 and live here and eat and, whatever.
Yep.
And, we even still today, which amazes me, we come into some shops and they're still running 2 sets of books. The kind of risk that you have and what the IRS knows, the fact that recently the feds, if you deposit more than $600, they're tracking that.
Yeah.
And they have statistical data on everything, what a decently run shop should do, what a normal shop should do. And, we have to be an industry that can make money the right way and take really great care of our clients.
Yes.
I would tell you that there's a reputation, and I think we're better than dentists now, but we're probably number 3 on the hated scale. Yep. I think that reputation has been earned not because we have a bunch of dishonest shops, but because we have a bunch of broke shops.
Yeah.
And so when something happens to your client, I had a guy that did 2 Porsche motors. Now, he's not a Porsche shop. So I also work with guys that are Porsche specialists, and we're building motors at $150,000.
Wow.
And I look at this guy's numbers, and I'm like, wow, you had a really great month. Yeah, I did. We did 2 Porsche motors, $30,000 a piece. And I'm like, we got a problem because we didn't account for the fact that we might have to warranty this, et cetera, et cetera. So 2 months later, one of the engines blows up. And they have to rebuild another Porsche motor for no profit at all.
Yep.
So it took away all the profit from both of the jobs they had done. And the guy tells me, I'm never going to do a Porsche motor again. But it's not because they didn't do the engine right necessarily. And it's not because they're bad people.
Yep.
It's because he didn't understand markup, margin, what I should be doing, the liability that we have today.
Yes.
When I started, now we're talking a long time ago. I had a lot more hair. It was darker, et cetera. I was skinnier.
Yep.
When I started, the liability you had was almost zero, period. You know, if somebody went out and, you know, the car burned up in their garage, it wasn't costly. It didn't. And now the liability we have we've touched your car. If somebody goes out and something, even if something happens that we didn't necessarily affect, we're going to be involved in the lawsuit.
Yep.
I've seen guys go to prison.
Wow.
Owners, because something wasn't done correctly in their shop. And I don't think most owners even understand the kind of liability they have in this business. They certainly, most businesses don't charge enough to really pay their, not only pay their techs, but take care of the liability that they have, the risk that they've created for themselves.
Yeah, that's something that they fail to. We see that all the time. They're I can't mark the part up that much. I can't mark up my labor that much. But what they don't factor in is they carry all the risk. You as the business owner, you have to stand behind that product. You have to keep the lights on. You're supporting other people's lifestyles and their families' lives. And if you aren't thinking about all of those factors, that should help you justify.
We have this over in the industry. The conversation goes on that, you know, oh, that guy's making money, he must be ripping customers off or something. There's this, like, I really understand his business better than my own, and I know he's cheating people because he's actually, you know, going home at 5 and you know, he's got money in the bank, etc. And I'm struggling.
Yeah,
I can't go home at 5 because I've got to finish 2 cars so I can make payroll tomorrow.
Yep.
And so we have this narrative that's like, if you're making money, it's a bad thing.
Profit became a dirty word for some reason.
And it shouldn't be, because you go into business to create personal wealth. That's the purpose of a business, right?
Yep.
And you certainly don't want to rip people off, but isn't it also fair that you make a decent living, that you have the money to send your kids to college or teach them a good trade, or, you know, that you can afford, you know, shoes for your kid who's going to play basketball in high school?
Yeah.
Isn't that okay, right?
Should be.
And then there's also, I think, in coaching, as well as the industry, there's this idea of, well, geez, if I just get to $1 million in sales, you know, there's this $1 million sales or $1 million a month sales or whatever. So I'm working with a client in the Phoenix area, him and his 2 sons. They did $2 million in sales. They lost just under $200,000 that year.
Ouch.
And so I'm talking to the owner, and we're having a conversation. And I said, "What's your goal for next year?" He said, "Well, we want to do $3 million in sales." And I'm like, "Oh, you want to lose $300,000, right?" Because again, if I'm losing 5 cents on every job,
yep,
how many jobs do I want to do, right?
Yep.
And I said, "Wouldn't it be better if we had a focus on, you know, I want to make 20% net profit, so maybe I only do $1.5 million, but I put 300,000 in the bottom line."
Yeah.
And actually get paid for my work here and my investment here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we also need to make a shift from, I need more cars, to I need cars that count and that pay the bills. And I need to do $1 million or $1.5 million or $2 million or $10 million, whatever it is.
Doesn't matter.
In order to survive, I need to run my business this way, so that $1 million, I make the money I need. At $2 million, I make the money I need to make, or I should make.
Yep.
For the work and the energy and the effort. I didn't want to be in this automotive business after working with my dad for 17 years, because it was like, if you can't make a decent living and have a life outside of going to work every day,
yep,
I don't want to be involved.
Yeah.
And so I went out and I did some other things which were fun, and I learned a lot about sales and all that, but I ended up back in the industry like the mob, right? They drag you back in. And I'm glad I'm here, because I've been able to help thousands of shop owners really understand, and I think it's starting to change the industry, even if it's not changing fast enough for me, right?
There are a lot of people out there that are working hard to change the industry. That is one of the things I've seen, but there's so many shops out there that are exactly what you've described.
And I don't know how to reach them, right? We do podcasts. We have ours.
Yep.
We have all kinds of free content in our YouTube channel. Like, if you want to come in and learn about, I I have a class that's called Everything You Need to Know About Numbers and Profit.
Yep.
For shops, right? And it's a 2-hour class. We often give it away. We charge a little bit on our website for it, but I have how to figure out your labor rate, and that's free. We did 58 or 59 shorts, 5 minutes to 20-minute videos.
Wow.
Over a year and a half, and they're all how to increase your average repair order.
Yep.
How to figure out what your labor rate should be. How to pay your technicians. How to build a pay plan that works. And so there's all this free content that's out there. Yeah. And you wonder, why do we still have starving shops? Why do we have shops where the technicians are complaining that they're not getting, there'll always be some small percentage that should complain because they're complainers.
Yep.
But we have this whole narrative where we're losing techs out of the industry because they don't see a future for themselves and their families, is what it really comes down to. And it is about money. Yeah. And I don't know, as much as we do, there's some portion of the industry we're not getting into the bulk of the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you when I drive up and down our main roads and I see shop after shop after shop, they're not here. They're not out working on making a better shop, right? They're doing exactly what you've described. And it just does the industry as a whole a disservice, right? Because those techs now are exiting, that are working for them, are exiting the industry instead of propelling it.
And there's this whole argument, I still run into shops. There's a whole, tier of shops and stuff that are not, they're still running discount coupons for we still have people teaching, bring the car in, get a cheap oil change, bring them in for that. And the problem is that, I always say a blind dog finds a fire hydrant every once in a while.
Yep.
But you have to chase so many non-fire hydrants, but to find them. Yeah. But we still have shops doing that. Yeah. And we have coaching companies that are teaching that. And it's 1960s thinking, it's 1970s thinking. That's not where we're at in this industry. And if we stay there, it hurts everybody in the industry. We have to create a narrative of your car is sophisticated. When I worked on cars, carburetors and points and condensers, really a basic thing. Today we have cars with 20 plus computer systems running everything on the vehicle. And some shops are still running like it's a carburetor and a 6-cylinder, a straight 6.
We're just changing parts.
Yeah. And we need to create the idea that I'm worth what any dentist or any doctor or any lawyer or any accountant is worth. Right?
100%.
Recently I had a water heater bust in my basement, and we're going to sell the house, so we cleaned the basement. There was nothing down there, so no damage, but I come home and there's an inch of water in my basement. And so I called the plumbers. I could certainly go down to Home Depot and get spend $1,200 and get a really nice water heater in my shop, or I can pay somebody else to lug it down the basement, get the old one out, do the work, etc. Yep. So I called plumbing company, and they come out and they estimate, the job, and he's like, it's going to be about $2,400 by the time we had tax and everything. Yep. And I'm like, wow, I don't want to spend $2,400, but I don't want to I don't want to do this. Right? Yep. So I told him, I said, go ahead, but I have to ask you one question. You have to answer the question. He's like, okay, I'll answer whatever question. I said, what are you charging per hour? Right? I want to know what your labor rate is per hour. Yep. And he said, well, I don't normally have this conversation. I'm like, look, I'm a business consultant. I just want to know as a comparative thing. Yep. And he said, we charge $5.50 an hour.
Wow.
Okay. Now, by the way, I could go to Home Depot and for $800 to $1,200 buy the nicest water heaters they have. Yep. Then I could drag it home in my truck, drag it into my basement, realize I don't have all the tools I need, go back to Home Depot to get the tools, right? Yep. Then worry if I did it exactly right, etc. Or I can hire somebody to do it. I was like, okay, wonderful, you do it. Yep. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to pay $2,400, but
you want to do the rest of it.
And so I'm thinking about plumbers and shops.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm a shop owner, I the least I probably have invested in equipment is $150,000.
Yep.
Right. You know, you get 3 or 4 racks, you maybe get an alignment rack, you get your own hand tools, you get your scanners, and pretty soon you're at $150,000 or more.
Yep.
This guy had a couple $1,000s worth of tools and an old truck.
Yep.
Right. An old van that had their picture on the side, etc.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about liability. I'm thinking about, you know, what do you really need to know to change a water heater, as opposed to this car doesn't run right electronically and I'm going to get in there and really diagnose it, right?
Yep.
What do you need to know? What's the difference? And we're in our industry, there were a couple of polls that were just done. Autoleap did one. Parts Tech did one recently, put out a report. And I think Techmetric did one. And the average labor rate was, I think, in the 120s.
Wow.
And so here you have somebody that has a lot more tools and equipment, physical location,
Yep.
a lot more liability, a lot more education needed, and they're charging $126. And probably, if they are, they're probably towards the higher end and not the lower end in their where they live.
Yep.
And I got a plumber in Ogden, Utah, which is not the most expensive place in the world to live.
Yeah.
And they're charging $550 an hour. And I mean, I have accountants. I don't want to tell you what I pay my accountant per hour or my lawyer per hour. And I think, like my dad, you know, he grew up poor. He was, at 12, he dropped out of school to go to work to help his family with, you know, to help pay bills and feed the family.
Yeah.
And then he worked at a Ford dealer as like a cleanup kid, and then he became a Ford tech, and then he started his own shop. I can't tell you how many times I heard my father say, "I'm just a mechanic." Like that meant that I'm not worth what a doctor, lawyer, etc.
Yep.
I have 2 college degrees. I graduated cum laude, however you say it. You know,
got it.
all A's, all of that, and but I didn't learn what I know in college sitting in a class.
No.
I learned what I know from my experience in life, in business, the mistakes I made, you know, that I paid for really well. And every single person that owns a shop or that knows how to work on a car and actually fix a car, they've paid for that worth, that value.
Yep.
So why am I a coach? Why did this start? Why did I start the Institute? That's the story. That's the whole story.
That's a great story.
We fight every day. I feel like I'm in a
Boxing.
15 round fight every single day.
Yeah.
To get the industry, the owners, even other coaching companies to create the worth and the value that we really have. Because if we're not, we're going to be forced into it.
Mm-hmm.
The industry's changing. We have private equity that's coming in very strong.
Yep.
We have technology is just advancing at this unbelievable pace. I was having a conversation with, I can't even remember who, one of the other coaches, and I was like, well, what's your biggest worry? And they're like, I'm worried that we won't have people that can actually fix the cars.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And we won't if we don't charge right, if we don't understand our business. So I know how to make this car run extremely sophisticated. We've got hydraulics, electronics, computer systems, you know, all of that. We got a internal combustion engine. It might also have a electrical generation system. Whatever they call it, when the braking that creates energy. You know,
regenerative braking.
Yeah, regenerative braking, etc. All these systems, we know how to make that happen, but we don't really know how to run our business.
Yep.
So, you know, what's the brain power I need for that?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, running the business is a lot simpler.
Yeah.
Just you need to pull some of your emotions out and then figure it out.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of free stuff. Gearforshops.com. I know you guys have, you know, financial stuff that you do. There's other companies that do all kinds of free stuff. There's a couple of other podcasts out there, wonderful educational materials. We just have to, if we figured it out, this whole industry would just It would take such a leap forward. And I just hope before I die, I get to see that.
Absolutely. Well, and you bring up private equity, and that is going to force change in the industry, right? They are going to buy these shops, and they are going to turn them into professional businesses.
Yeah, where it's about the bottom line and not necessarily the customer or the employee.
And if you let them take over, that will hurt things.
Yeah,
but,
it'll hurt our clients too.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. But you have to look at how they run a business, because they will run it with structure and process and systems. And if you don't do that as a shop owner, right, who are you going to go to? Am I going to go to my shop that's going to deliver a consistent product to me every time that I can rely on, and I know what to expect?
So we have worked with thousands of shops over the years, and we currently work with, I don't know where we're at right now, somewhere between 250 and 300 shops currently. And so we see all these different shops, and we look at the results. And frankly, if I did the statistical data analysis, which I do a lot of that, the shops that are more expensive are more consistently busy, and they're the ones putting money in the bottom lines, and they're the ones generating better customer service, et cetera, because their customers love them and keep coming back. It's the shops that do this, let's check you out, and if you don't buy something, then I'm going to chase you away, or I'm going to give you this discounted thing I'm going to try to get you back 3 times with 2 free oil changes or whatever. Those are the shops that are inconsistent and not as profitable. Yeah. And so, being able to see all these different shops and all their numbers, it's really the guys that are higher price, that are more consistent, that actually have better reputations in almost every single case.
And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? Who is going to take care of that customer on the front end better? The service advisor that's paid well, that works a regular schedule, that can make their kids' baseball games.
Right.
Or the guy who is getting nickel and dimed from their owner, right? Because he can't afford to pay you. You can barely hold on. And you don't have enough built into your labor rate to really afford that service advisor. Yeah. And that guy's stressed about paying his bills while he's taking care of your customers.
And if you understand the business, you can build pay plans. In 2010, I had technicians making over $140,000. It's huge. In 2010. And I had service advisors making that kind of money in 2010 with a $150 labor rate.
Yep.
And so you can do it and build it. And my customers loved what we did for them.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that we have this, I don't think we deserve it in a way. And so then it hurts us as we, move ourselves forward.
It definitely does.
As an industry.
Definitely. What do you see that's happening next with the Institute? So Kent's coming in.
We have a Mars conference, which is a marketing for auto repair shops, which is really somewhat unique in 3 weeks at our location. Kent, my son, has been with me for about 11 years now. He's our chief operations officer. I'm really trying to become a CEO, right, in a bigger company.
Yep.
We'd certainly like to own more of the marketplace, because we believe that what we have to offer is very valuable. And I want to change the world, and the more people we have, the more the world changes. And frankly, I also like to have money in the bank.
Yep.
And which gives me freedom. We're doing this marketing conference. It's somewhat unique in that when we bring someone in to our conferences, they're not selling their product. They're helping you. So we have someone coming and talking about the future of AI and how to use it and how not to use it and what the risks are, et cetera. We have people coming in to talk about how to do video, social media stuff for your business. We have people come talking about websites and SEO, SEM, and and then on the last day of the conference, we're actually breaking out into smaller groups, and the people that spoke as experts and the Institute will be working with you to create not only a marketing plan, but also who is my best customer, to figure that out.
So important,
because that's who you want to attract. And so the Institute, we have some very lofty goals. This year we're going to double in size.
Wow.
We did over the last 3 years about 126, 128% growth for the company.
Wow.
We brought in a private equity person who understands what the private equity is and can help our shops multiply. And really, instead of getting
Smart.
like right now, the average shop gets 2.8 times EBITDA
Yep.
as a sale price. But the private equity that's coming in, some of the private equity is still trying to buy shops cheap, but some of the private equity is really trying to buy shops that are well run, and they will pay 5-6x. And then if you're a shop that does more, like if you have like 10 million in run rate and over $1 million in EBITDA, like 15% net, so $1.5 million.
Yep.
Now they're paying 8, 6, 8, even 10x for multiple shops. So we brought private equity, not as they didn't buy our business, but we have a private equity guy that's now part of our company.
Smart.
Brought him in so we can start helping our shops in a different way to take advantage of the changes that are coming, that we believe are coming to the industry. And by the way,
Definitely.
it's not just my belief. That's what's happening even as we speak right now.
It's happening in our industry too. I mean, the parallels between the accounting industry and the automotive repair industry.
Dental. You could literally look at, auto body. You could look at hardware stores. Most of the companies have gone through it. We're just the next in line. Maybe that's also happening in accounting, but shop owners that are ready to get out now, if they spend a little time and get their shop running better, they could make another 1x or 2x.
That's huge.
Shops that are going to get out in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, that want to grow a little bit and actually really run their business well, they could get out with another 3 or 4x. And guys that want to go out and purchase other shops and run them correctly, create their own kind of platforms, they could get out with a 10x or even a 15x.
Wow.
And so that's the difference in the industry. I don't think that 10 years ago that the opportunity to get more than about 4x out of your shop, and by saying X, you know what I mean, but some people might not. It's multipliers of your EBITDA with add backs in.
We call that seller's discretionary cash flow. EBITDA. You'll hear all these terms. It's really cash flow for that business.
But I love the EBITDA because I'm always like earnings before income tax, depreciation, and I always want to say accumulation. And I have to think about what it is for a bit. So what's the A? Remind me. Amortization. And depreciation is hard assets. Amortization is soft assets.
You got it. Intangible, blue sky. Yep.
And today, funny thing too, I don't think that blue sky is what it was even 5 years ago. I think there's less blue sky in the business. So it's even more important now that I run my business well and produce a consistent growth and a consistent net out of that business if I want to maximize my out.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I think is really important, and maybe ought to be mentioned, it's, I've had, I had a shop, wife and son came to us. The father committed suicide. The son, the wife didn't know anything about the shop. The son was very young and now very angry and trying to save the business, etc. So they come to us for coaching, and they're doing great. A lot of good things have happened for them. Good. But we have a lot of shops where they have a son or a daughter or family, and they haven't worked out the exit planning or strategy. And it's hard to talk about it. And a lot of older guys or, families, women, men, that might be the person who owns most of the stock or owns the business. Yeah. They, for some reason, to have that conversation and to figure this out is very, very difficult.
Yes.
But if you don't, it can be devastating for your family when you're not here, whether you do it or it happens. And we're all going to, you don't get out of this life, I'm going kicking and screaming, but I'm going nonetheless.
You want to hand them the keys, not make them find the keys.
And then you guys also know like taxes and probate and, it's really so much better to figure it all out and get it all planned now.
Yep.
And also, if you want your kids to be successful in your business, wouldn't you want them to learn how to really run the business, even if you haven't, and give them the best chance of success? And so we have a lot of clients that come to us and they're like, teach my kids how to run this business. I mean, we worked with guys that it's not about making money. I had a guy that, he made $500,000 a year, and he comes to me and he's like, I just need to know how to have a life outside of my shop. Okay, great. We can work with you on that.
Yeah.
Different situations for different people.
Yeah, I love when a shop owner comes to us and they say, teach my kid how to understand the financials.
Yeah.
Because I don't.
But holy smokes, if you could understand the financials,
Yep.
there's some really minor tweaks you can make that will create potentially really tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars in a business in a year.
It's so simple. Even if you create, you find 3,000 of expenses a month.
Yeah.
It's $36,000 a year.
Yeah.
How much does your life change with $36,000, right? That's a vacation every year.
Yeah.
Week-long vacation. You could probably shut down your shop for a week.
But also if you most shops are making 38 or 42% on their parts profit.
Yeah.
They should be making 58. If you can even get them from, say, 42 to 52, it's 10%. So if you're $1 million shop, you're going to do, $480,000 in parts.
Yep.
That's $48,000 a year in additional profit, and you're not bringing more customers in.
Nope.
It's running the numbers right can make you.
So simple.
I would tell you from my experience, which is fairly vast at this point.
Yep.
The average shop is probably losing somewhere close to $140,000 a year just to mismanagement of, how to do markup pricing, et cetera. And then there's probably another $100,000 in productivity that's missing because you don't have system and process. So you can make another $250,000 out of $1 million shop.
Wow.
Just by making some
Tweaking
minor
the
change,
dials.
making some tweaks, right, and learning what you need to learn.
Yeah.
So
the easiest things that we find when we talk to a shop and they have a parts margin issue is they don't know what a parts pricing matrix is.
Yeah. And there's about three ways that it goes. So one is I'm using suggested list as my markup.
Yep.
And if you're using suggested list, you're going to be in the mid to high 30s percents, right?
Yep.
When you should be at least 52 probably minimum.
Yep.
Then there's I'm going to double every part. So you get a $4 filter, you make it $8. You feel really good about that, but you get a $2,000 transmission.
Yep.
You're not making it $4,000. And so mathematically speaking, and you guys are math guys.
Yep.
So how many $4 oil filters do I need to sell at $8 to earn 50% margin when I sell one engine or one transmission that's a $2,000 transmission at $3,000?
Yeah, you can't.
You'll never make it.
You'll
you
never
don't
make
get
it.
there.
Yep.
So if you're using 50% as your number, you use them in the low 40s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you see that, and then you also have guys that have matrix, and they have like different point of sale systems has a different way to do it, but you can put a parts pricing matrix, which is really, I get a $1 part in, I charge, maybe 4 or 5 for it.
Yeah.
I get a $5,000 part, I charge $6,000 for it.
Yep.
And so I'm making less margin at a bigger part, but I'm making higher margins on a lower part.
Mm-hmm.
And we add it all together depending on your business and the type of business you do. How many $59 oil changes are you doing, losing money?
Yep.
And how many, $400 brake jobs are you doing,
Yep.
et cetera. And you add it all together. You really want to be in that 58's the target. 50. I always tell my clients 55 is like, okay, you're all right. I'm not going to yell at you. We get down to 52 or below, I'm going to yell at you. We're going to figure this out.
I like that.
The easiest thing to fix in an automotive business is they put a parts matrix in place. You're probably going to gain 30 or 40 grand a year.
Yep.
And frankly, the customer doesn't know. And yes, there is competition, but there's always been competition. I have been dealing with competition on parts pricing for 42 years.
Yep.
Okay. And you just have to understand that part that you buy at Amazon may or may not be counterfeit, may or may not fit properly, has no warranty. I can't chase. My wife has some breathing issues, so I bought a portable oxygen thing. Happened to come out of China, got it. It doesn't generate enough oxygen. Try getting that taken care of, right? I just spent $1,600. I flushed $1,600 down the toilet. I should have paid $2,500 for a system built in the United States for somebody that's a reputable manufacturer.
Yep.
But that part from Amazon doesn't guarantee that it'll fix it, doesn't come with a warranty, doesn't come with my customer service, doesn't come with a clean car, all the different things that you can provide. And I think owners need to understand, and service advisors need to understand, how do I answer that question?
Yep.
Right? And there is an answer. And the answer is, I have to make a profit on it. I have to guarantee these things. I have liability because I've put it on your car. And so I've got to charge you a little more than you might buy it for.
Yep.
And I've got to make margins. So I put a parts matrix in place. Easiest thing to do is put it in place and stick to it.
Do it.
Which is also the hardest thing.
Yep.
Because the owner's looking at this, thing they bought that's, it's $200 and the matrix is going to run it up to $380 or maybe even $400. And you're like, oh my God, I don't want to pay $400 for that. And then you're like, I'll take $50 off, right? That'll make the customer feel good. That way the customer will buy it. But if you take, I always do this in class. I'll say, how many cars do you work on a day?
Yep. So you do.
We work on, say, 10, right? Okay, 10 cars. And let's say that you, on average, give away $20.
Yep.
So maybe you got a cheap oil change, and that's part of it. Or maybe you're like, oh, that part's too much, so you lower it by $50. But the average is like $20 a car.
Yep.
So now you're giving away $200 a day.
Yep.
And you're open for 250 days.
Mm-hmm.
How much have you given away?
A lot.
Right?
Yeah. 50 grand.
50 grand. Right? It's $50,000 in a year. And it's magic dollars because you never saw it. You didn't think when you said, oh, I'll just mark it down, make the customer feel better. You didn't realize that you're actually taking $50 out of your pocket and giving it to the customer.
Now you don't think about that.
Yeah, the parts matrix is the way to go. We're actually working with Parts Tech and some other companies. We're really talking about parts matrix right now. Mm-hmm. And there's also another discussion about why don't we just lower the parts and raise our labor rates.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I don't know that I agree with that. Although if I'm making a certain amount of gross profit dollars per hour in my company that pays the bills and gives me the profit I need, I guess it doesn't matter. I guess maybe I'm old-fashioned and I'm like, I need to make money on parts and labor. So I don't know. There's these discussions going on, but there's still too many shops that they don't have a parts matrix in place, and or if they do, they don't stick to it. Nobody's managing it. If you ask someone about their parts margins, well, what was your parts margin last month? 8.5 out of 10 shops, they wouldn't even be able to tell you what their margin was. No idea, which means it's probably 38 to 42%, and you're losing $40,000, $50,000 a year.
One of the biggest problems is you go on Google, you search, what should I mark up a part?
Oh.
It tells you 30%.
Yeah, and by the way, there's some old guys. That's what I learned, 40 years ago. And then I went to some smarter guys who said, okay, it's got to be higher. And then I realized as a coach that there are other costs and other liabilities we have now, so it's actually got to be higher. And I've got to pay techs more, so it has to be they're And you'll see a shop where they have really good labor margin, not because they're charging a high labor rate, because they're not paying enough to their techs, but their gross margin's great.
Yes.
But their parts margin sucks. Well, what you're doing is giving your customer these discounts, and the tech is the one paying for it.
Yeah.
That's not even fair.
It's not
no
fair.
wonder we're having these conversations about techs in our industry. We don't have the cojones to charge what we need to.
Yeah.
We don't know how to do that, and we're not willing to take the time or even pay the dollars to learn what it is. The education that I have received has allowed me to make, I don't know, certainly millions of dollars. I've raised 4 kids, so believe me, I've gone through millions of dollars in my lifetime. But it's allowed me to live a certain lifestyle and to be able to do things for the industry and to be able to have relationships with my kids and, have the ability to support my children, et cetera. And it's invaluable. The education, the money I paid to work with coaches and coaching companies has been paid back to me 100 times over the years.
Totally. I really appreciate all the knowledge you've shared with us. If somebody wants to get more information, you guys are on YouTube.
WeAreTheInstitute.com.
WeAreTheInstitute.com. Go visit their website. Go to their YouTube page. Find those free resources and change your shop.
And if you're looking for a great accounting company, my guys at Kaizen do a great job.
Much appreciated. Thank you for your time. Listeners, tune in to next time.
Thank you much.
You have been listening to the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. You can hear more real stories from real business owners about what it takes to make it in business by subscribing to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you like what you hear, leave a review and a 5-star rating. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs and Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com.